You ready? Okay.
Okay. My name is Alfred Goldstein Tibor. I was born in 1920 in Hungary, in the little village Konyár. We are going to spell it to you. It's Konyar, and it is in eastern part of Hungary. It's close to the Romanian border, and the closest bigger city is the well-known city. It's Debrecen. It is. I try to spell it to you. It's DEBERCZEN, Debrecen. And the little village, it was a typical Hungarian village where I was born, approximately between 800 to 1,000 people, population, 18 Jewish family, and I was the only little Jewish boy in the whole entire school, and I was born that time already. The hatred against the Jews, it existed, because where I was born in 1920, that was when the Hungarian revolution, so-called white revolution, started in Hungary. After the First World War, from 1918 to 1920, there was a communist regime, a proletariat dictatorship. Leaders of the Communist Party were mostly born Jews. Samueli and Kun and Matyás Rákosi, which is well known after, when later years he became prime minister after protection of the Soviet regime in 1945. Only this is, I am not going ahead so much with the history, I am just staying in the 1920s. In the 1920s, the leader of the Hungarian government became the Nicholas Horthy, who was a horse riding admiral. They called him horse riding admiral because he was marching into Budapest in riding a white horse. And that time, that was the atrocities against Jews. It was only Hungary in the Western Europe, beside the pogroms of Russia and Poland, that was the open persecution against Jews in the 1920s. And after, because of the economic situation and because of the Versailles Peace Pact, the economic situation was very hard in Hungary, and it slowed down the hatred against the Jews, because they used the talent of the Jews of the economy, and which after the Jews was blamed for the economic situation in the worldwide economy breakdown in 1928 and 29. Whatever was and whatever happening in the United States, it happened all over the world. So the Jews were hated and hatred, and especially I am talking about because I was born that way, and in my back all the time I had the dirty Jew slogans. So I was a dirty Jew at that time, and if I may, I am just going to tell you a very short way how I became a proud Jewish little boy, because I always looked younger than my age. When I was drafted when I was 20 years old, the army general wanted to send me home because we don't need kids, because I look like 14. So when I was 6 years old and 7 years old, I looked like even smaller, and in my nature I was a very short little boy. And it's happened once in one Friday afternoon because my father was a respected businessman in the little village. He owned a lumber yard, only he didn't want it to be a businessman. Only that time, whatever the father was telling to the son, you are going to be that, so that he had to be. Actually, he was a rabbi and he graduated in Bratislava in a yeshiva, a famous yeshiva in Europe, and he had a rabbi degree, and only he had to be a businessman because he had a lumber yard. All the peasants who needed some help, or they needed lumber for building a home or building a roof of the home, there was Mr. Goldstein who helped them out. So he was a respected person. And the teacher, because I was Mr. Goldstein's son, they made an exception and they let me go home earlier than the regular school hours. The school was open till 5 o'clock afternoon, only I was permitted to go home 3 o'clock to preparing ourselves to go to the synagogue. And it was in winter time, and once it is happened, the strongest boy in the class made a criterion which was sitting in back of me, and he said, "Oh, you little dirty Jewish kid, you could go home and you could go home earlier than we have to sit here." And that time somehow I lost my control and I got so mad, I grabbed his head with my arm and I hit his face into the table, and it was bleeding, and like nothing happened. I was just going home. I didn't say a word to my father. We prepared ourselves to going to the synagogue, and we were coming back from the synagogue, and there was Mr. Virag and his son with full of bandage in their head, and he was a tall boy, almost twice as tall as I am, and the father was telling to my dear father, "Your son was beating up my son." And my father, rest in peace, he just said a word, "My little son, would you please," I was the little all the time because we were three of us and I was the youngest one. So even if I was grown up, I was the little one. So that time I was really a little one, and he was telling me to stand by Mr. Virag's son. And I was a little one and he was a giant. So, and he was telling wisely to to the boy's father, "Mr. Virag, you are telling me that little boy started a fight with your son with no reason?" And he was asking me what was the reason. And I was telling him, he called me a dirty Jew. And that time my father was a quiet man. Also, he just said, "Look, my son, if you wouldn't act like that, I would beat you up so much in your rear end you wouldn't able to sit in your chair. So you did the right thing." And he asked Mr. Virag to leave the house and go whenever he wants to and sue us whatever he wants to do. He was very proud of me, and from that little moment in my life, I became a very proud man, a very proud Jewish man. And I am telling you this story because in today's life, we are writing right now the 86, and lots of Jews are very proud. Today, when Israel existing and the historical event, whatever it happened, only that time, not too many proud Jews were, especially under the circumstances how we lived in Hungary, between the anti-Semitism everywhere. I was a proud little Jewish boy, and after that, in this happening, after I was the strongest boy, I was the most honorable boy in the whole school because I beat up the strongest guy, so I was the big shot. And from that nature, it followed me all the time. I never believed the hatred is going to succeed. Even in the darkest age, I never believed I am not going to succeed and I am not going to survive. The hope, it was in my nature. Since I was a little boy, I liked the sunshine. And it is, I am going to tell you how little things is changing and how it is coming back to your life, actually what you believe. And after the wind of the historical happenings and the historical facts, how it is keeping you alive to believing of the tomorrow. And that time, as a little boy, I don't know, it is, as I am thinking back, I don't know how could a little boy is thinking that way how I was thinking that time. I don't know, probably every child is thinking that way, only I am just thinking I was the only one who are thinking that way. And I had a little artistic feeling. The reason, again, from the background I have to go back, my father had a artistic background. And in the introduction I forget to tell you I am a sculptor. Only I am going to get into it how I became a sculptor. Only that time as a little boy, I remember my father had 2 watercolor paintings in his office. And he couldn't be an artist, and because he had to go to a rabbinical school to be educated in the rabbinical school, because my grandfather wanted him to be a rabbi. And this is the way it was. And after he wanted him to be a merchant, and that's it. No question, no freedom, selection of the youth. He had to do it. So he didn't become an artist. Only that time, you know, a little boy, I was all the time around the kitchen, around my mother. And when she was baking bread, I was taking the dough and I was playing with the dough, with the fresh bread dough. Or when she was cleaning the candelabras in Sunday morning, from the candle scrapes, I started to play with the candles and the doughs, bread doughs, and making little figures. That was my first sculpting in my life. Only I thought I am the only person who is doing that. After I figured out every kid is playing with it and it is natural things. Only that time I was doing that. Only I am going to go back to my education. I was taken from the little village which I couldn't get higher education. I was taken to Debrecen, which is the closest city from the village. And because the hard economic situation, I was taken to the gymnasium. It's called the high school gymnasium in Hungary. And it was 4 downgraders and 4 upgraders. It was actually today's life is the junior high and the senior high. So when you finished the 8-year high school, you could go to when you graduated, you could go to the universities. Now here it's coming the story of the anti-Semitism in Hungary. The first anti-Semitic racist law was in Hungary, and it's called the numerus clausus. The numerus clausus is a Latin word. It means closed numbers. So because the Jews in the economic situation, they were better situated and they could afford to send their children to study because the universities and the high school cost money. And because they were in the situation, they would afford that, and they could afford that to send the kids to the universities. That time already in 1926 came the numerus clausus, which means, for example, in the whole university, which was in Debrecen, there was a famous university, and there was just permitted 2 Jews to the whole university. So what's happening with the others? They had to go to outland, outside from Hungary. They went to Czechoslovakia, they went to England, France, Italy, who could afford it to send their child. Because my father wasn't, was hit in the 1930s with the economy situation, and I had to go to the high school, and it cost us, for a year tuition was 280 penge, which means like $280. And it was a lot of money that time. So I was able to finish just 4 years. I couldn't get the higher education to able to go to university. I was just finishing the lower high school 4 years, and meantime already I had to work to able to finish the 4 years high school. I had to help my father to able to pay the tuitions. I was selling, and I was going to the homes, soliciting and selling certain things, shoe polishes and all these little things. And the artistic feeling, when I saw in the stores there are little show cards in the window, and because children likes the candy store, I was going in the candy store, front of the candy store, and the way how they are displaying the candies in the store, they are putting little signs front of the merchandise. And that time already I had the ability to writing the fancy signs. I learned in the high school in the first year and the second year already I learned something, and I discovered I have ability of using my hand. And I started to make little samples, and I solicited. I went to store, and I was selling for 2 cents and 3 cents and 4 cents the little show cards. And this way I provided help to my father to able to learn and finish the junior high school. And I was working in the matzahs factory in the meantime, and I earned there the money. And this is, we are talking already in the 1930s. And I have to go, and I am giving you a segment all the time of the year because it's following it is happened. I was born in 20, and the whole thing, it started in 1920 in the historical event which concluded to the end. It was started when I was born. And as I mentioned it, or I don't know, I mentioned it already, or it is taped, the first Nazi regime was in Hungary, and the first Nazi in Europe was Niklas Horthy. And it is the product of the Hungarians and the Hungarian attitudes, because they were anti-Semite, and the Jews was blamed because they were capitalist. Only after that we were blamed because we were communist. So how it could be one kind of people, how it could be both the enemy of each other? One is communist, the other is capitalist. And the Jews was blamed for everything. And it is a wonderful thing today. I could talk about this like an outsider, and I am looking into it. Only this is the historical event, actually, how it is happened in the whole Europe, because how I was growing, that's way is the hatred was growing in Europe and in the world. And lots of people came before the First World War from Europe. The Russians came in the 1900s, and from Hungary they were coming or before the First World War, or they were coming after the 20s, because of the economy situation was very hard in Hungary and Middle Europe, and they were coming to the United States because America was a dream to everybody. It is not accidentally happened when Eli Wallach was making the film of his story, and the title was America, America. He was coming from Turkey, through Turkey from Romania. And that was the dream to everybody, to come to the United States, to come out from Europe. And the Jews were hit the most, because it was personally a persecution against the Jews. It was quiet down in the 26th and the 30s. Only it started to flaming after the 30s, because the economy situation were bad, and who you could blame? The Jews. You could blame for the economy situation. And that time started in Hungary, and in 1934, when I was finishing my high school, I paused a year, and maybe I forget to tell you that only we were 3 of us brothers. I had a brother which his name was Tibor Goldstein, who was elder, 8 years older than me. He was born in 1912. I have another brother whose name is Andrew. He was born in 1917, and I was born in 1920. So my elder brother, my oldest brother, was that time already in Budapest, and because he wanted to study and he wanted to make a living, he had the ability, all of 3 of us had the ability to use their hand. And he was an exposition designer and a graphic artist. Posters and reclam, he was making posters, color posters, and he was in the advertising field in the today's how we could translate it. And he was in the advertising field, and meantime he was studying, because he wanted to be a doctor. He was studying in Italy. Only that time the economy situation and the permission wasn't permitted to work in Italy. You just, if you had money, you could go to Italy. If you didn't have money, you couldn't go to Italy. So that time he was earning the money in Budapest and was going to the university, because you didn't have to be sitting in the class all the time. You could go, that time it was a system, you could go and just listen a certain hours and just make the exams. And that way he studied to be a doctor. Only meantime he was earning as a graphic artist, as a advertising man in Hungary. And I was frustrated in Debrecen, and I wanted to do something with my life. I was dreaming about to be a architect and a sculptor. Only I couldn't educate myself. I didn't have higher education. I couldn't go. We didn't have the money. And I was frustrated. And I was making a couple of drawings. And that time already I made a lino cut. Linoleum cut, maybe, I don't know, you are familiar or not. you are cutting the you are etching a linoleum piece, and you are making a print from it, a black and white print. And I made a little print, and I sent a letter to my brother, and it was 1936. And he was telling me, my little brother, if you are so talented like that, come up to Budapest and we're going to do something. You are going to get a job and you are going to learn something. Just come up. Don't be frustrated in Debrecen. You have to come up to Budapest. It's a bigger city and you have more opportunity, and so and so. And this is the way I went up to Budapest in 1936, August the 20th. And I know, and it is very important for me, the dates, because the dates is making me the switch of my life. So my brother had a partner who was an architect, and his father was a prestigious businessman. And when I went to his office, I saw he had a nice drawing board and brushes and paint and everything, and I was getting so excited. I started to work in his desk and his drawing board and he was saying, hey, don't do that, you're going to ruin my brushes. And I said, no, I am not going to ruin your brushes. I am going to be careful, and I am going to do. And I made a couple of little sketches there, and the father came in, and he said, oh, if you are so talented, what you want to be, young man? What you are like to be? And I said, I want to be a sculptor. I want to be an architect, only I can't because I can't go to the school. He said, if you are not going to go to the school, you're going to be apprentices someplace. You know, that was the way, by experience, to learn something. And he said, oh, you like the three-dimensional things. I have a friend. He is a window trimmer. It is three-dimensional. Go be a window trimmer. I didn't know what is the window trimmer, and I didn't know what is the trimming windows or what is the three-dimensional things. I was interested already because I made the show cards in the window, and I show it to him. I made this and that and that. Okay, you are going to be a window trimmer. So it was stamped down, it was decided, and I went for an interview to this gentleman, and he said, okay, young man, I have a friend in the department store, and let's go to this department store, and I am going to talk to the display manager there. He is my friend, and he's going to hire you as a apprentice's window trimmer. This is the way I became a window trimmer in 1936. I started to be a window trimmer. Only it is happened behind the department store. The name of the department store, it was the Fenyves department store. It was in the Calvin Tér. It is in Budapest. It is central place where was the department store, and one of the third largest department store in Hungary. And behind the department store there was a art school. A technical art school, like today we could call the CCAD, like the CCAD in Columbus, the art school. Columbus Art and Design is the abbreviation of the CCAD. Only this was more technical than artistic school, that school. And I learned already in my life, when I was born, I was a little shy person. And I learned in my life, I can't be a shy person. I have to go ahead to do something, because if I am not going to do it, somebody else not going to do it for me. So I went into the school and I was inquiring how could I could be a student there. Right away, my name, they were asking my name, and my name was Alfred Goldstein. And they said, "You are Jewish?" I said, "Yes, I am Jewish." Right away, they kicked me out. "Jews, you can come here, you can't learn here because we can't take anybody who is Jewish." So I didn't give up so easy, and I went in again. And I asked a professor, "Can I just come into the room just to listen, to look how you are doing it?" The reason why I am saying this today in 1986, because here in the United States, everything is served to the youth to be whatever you want to be. It is served because you could go to the university and you could be whatever you want to be. And it is important. It was a struggle to me to be somebody at the age because I was a Jew. And there was the discrimination already long time in all my life. And I had to fight for the existence to be something and to be better than somebody else. And I have to tell you that that way I earned my existence in the department store because I was eager to do everything. And everybody wanted me to be the helper. I was the apprentice who the masters and the older people who were working there, everybody wanted the little Freddy because I was eager to work everywhere. And I could remember of the first day when what I was learning and how I studied for just to look at the person, how he is working. And that's why I learned I have to do my best every day because this is the way I am going to succeed. And whatever anybody is going to beat me down, I am going to do better, and I am hoping for the tomorrow it's going to be better. And because of the circumstances, because I didn't give up, there was one professor, and he was a limping person. He had some kind of disease in his leg, and he looked at me and he saw the eagerness to how I want to learn, and he said, "Young man, you want to learn how to draw, how to make drawings?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, you're going to make a sample drawings. Make me a sample drawings. Can you draw a cube?" I was a big shot. I was a big artist already, 16 years old. I did already lino cuts, and I was the greatest artist on the world. How this professor could ask me a question, "Can I make a cube?" Sure, I made a cube. I made a drawing of the cube. And again, I have to tell you that this is following me back all the year, and it has happened. Today we are reading 86, and I was 16 years old. It was 1936. And he was giving me a lesson which is I never going to forget, because I was making 2 evenings, I was making the cube, making the drawings, and I was shading it very carefully, and I made a beautiful drawings. And after when I finished, I said, "Professor, here is my drawings." He said, "Fine, this is what you are doing. Do you have a black pencil, a very soft pencil?" I said, "Yes, here is the soft pencil." And he made a crossed mark with my drawings, and I almost fainted. And I said, "What did you do with my drawings?" He said, "Now you sit down and you make the shadow and the shade so dark like this pencil mark. That's going to be your good drawing." And I worked 2 more days on this cube. only I learned after the thesis of the shadow and the shading and how to learn the perspective, and it followed all in my life. When this drawing, you saw it, you knew where was the light source on that drawing. I learned the shadow that time. That was the beginning to learn that one. And from that, I was sitting in on that school. I do not have any diploma. I do not have any education, official education. Somehow I managed all the time to listen, to be a listener in the schools. And I was studying there more than 2 years, and I was dreaming about. Meantime, I have to tell you, I was a little vigorous guy, and I discovered I could do gymnastics. When I was a little boy, the circus came to the little village. And when the circus came to the little village, the lumber yard was the first who they visited, and they were borrowing lumber for the benches. So Mr. Goldstein was giving the benches to the circus, and because I was Mr. Goldstein's son, they permitted to me to go to the trapeze and playing with the circus. And finally, they didn't let me to go to the circus because I was making better act than the acrobat in the circus. So in Hungary, I am going back to Debrecen, when I discovered there is a gymnastic place. Again, I am going back because it's showing how you had to struggle to get something. It was about 6 kilometers from my place where we lived, and I walked to this gymnasium, and there was a sign, no Jews. So the discrimination sign was there. Only I was a little guy, and I was sneaking in. I was sneaking into the gymnasium, and I put on my little cloth pants, and I started to work with the gymnastics on the parallel bar and the high bar, and I was jumping everywhere with no asking questions. And after the finishing, everybody was going to the shower. Here where I became in trouble, because I was sweating also, so I was going into the shower with everybody else. There are the big Gentile people there and grown-ups, very few little guy. Only because I was everywhere and going everywhere, everybody started to know me. Oh, here is the little guy is jumping here, the little guy jumping, making something, and they noticed me. Only they noticed me completely when we went to shower. Here we had the problem. Right away, they found out I am Jew, because it is no circumcision. Here in the United States, it wouldn't make the difference. Only in Hungary, there was no circumcised man, just a Jew. So there was the head coach, Mr. Smith. He originally was from Germany, and he was a big guy. And he picked me just like a little dog. They picking me up and holding me. Hey, you little Jewish guy, what the hell you are looking for here? And he threw me out completely from the shower. I started to cry, a little fellow. I was 13 years old or 14, something like that. I started and I sit down in the corner and I was crying. And he was coming out from the shower, and somehow, I don't know, he started to thinking, and he hurt me. So he said, hey, you are crying, show it to me, what can you do? And I was making a couple of things and roundups and little things And I went to the parallel bar, and the parallel bar was so wide, and my shoulder was so narrow. It wasn't for kids, and it was for grown-up people. So I went up to the parallel bar, climbed up, and I made a shoulder stand. The shoulder stand you're supposed to be on your shoulder, only it was in my elbow, which reached the bars. So I made, oh, he said, oh, you are, okay, we are going to make an exception. You go. I became the little Jewish boy for him. Became the little pet. You know, every anti-Semite in Europe had their Jews. Not you we are hating, the others.
Yeah.
So I was the little guy who he loved. Mr. Smith was putting me in his shoulder. I was able to, he had such a wide shoulder, I was easily to sitting in his shoulder. I was so little and he was so huge. So when I became in Budapest, I was coming to Budapest, and I started to go to a gymnasium, and there was a club, a Jewish club, where Jewish boys were exercising and gymnastics. And I became very, very strong with the gymnastics. Now there was, again, I have to tell you that the coach was an internationally known person, Mr. Goldstein. Mr. Goldstein was one of the gymnastic judge in 1932 in the Los Angeles Olympics. And in 1932 Los Angeles Olympics, the gymnastics champion was a Hungarian man, Stefan Pelle. If you look up the history, you're going to find it. And Mr. Goldstein was one of the 3 judges in worldwide, and he made him a champion. And he became the first Olympic Hungarian gymnastic champion with the Christ in the ring. If you are looking today the gymnastic events, there are the iron cross, and there is the cross when they are going down in the ring like that. And that was what Pelle was doing that time. It was very new. After they were making the iron cross, which is called in Hungarian the St. Peter, which was you are standing on your hand and you are going down. Just the opposite way. So I became very active in the gymnasium, and from Mr. Goldstein was sending me a selecting exercise where they were selecting the Olympiads for the Berlin Olympiad. And when you are making the selectings, you don't have to tell your name. You are just going in and making whatever you would like to. And I made my parallel bar exercise. And I got the 9.5. And when I got the 9.5, I was selected to stand on the right side. And when they selected the people, the educational professor was Stefan Pelle. This is the irony, again, of to be Jewish, and he became a well-known person in the world by a Jewish man, and that Jewish man was sending me to the selective exercise, and they selected me by the merit, what I was doing. And when they were registering me, I said, my name is Goldstein, Alfred Goldstein, from the Watts Club. The Watts Club was a Jewish club, VAC. And they kicked me out right away. Hey, Jew, what you are looking for here? Get out from here. I was going out crying like a baby again. And I was going to Mr. Goldstein and was complaining to him why he was sending me to be a gymnast, selected gymnast of the All-Stars from Hungary, because they are not going to take me anyway because I am Jewish. He said, I knew that they are not going to take you, just I wanted to show them we are having people who could go. Only they are not going to select you, so don't worry about that. So again, I couldn't be a gymnast. The reason, again, I am telling you these stories because this is a puzzle which I am trying to put together to able to understand why I am telling this little detailed story. Because this is, again, I couldn't be a gymnast, I couldn't be a sculptor, I couldn't be an architect because I was a Jew. Simple like that. And in 1937, I wanted to get out from Hungary in any price, in any way, because I saw what's coming, what the history is going to bring from us. The clouds were coming darker and darker. And somehow, I don't know, God gave me the foresight or what, I wanted to get out from Hungary because I had the struggle for every little bitty things. I was trying to do my best and still I couldn't succeed because I was a dirty Jew. And in 1937, there was the New York's World's Fair. I wanted to come to the United States in the 37, only I wasn't able to come because the little administrative things. There I had to provide a company who would send me as an educational tour as a window trimmer or a displayer or a exhibition designer to come to studying and looking the World's Fair. No, I needed a company which I couldn't produce who would send me officially.
A sponsor.
A sponsor. I didn't want to go back to Hungary, only I couldn't find anybody because they were afraid they are going to be responsible for my act because I didn't make secret about it. I was an honest person and I told them I don't want to come back. And it was wrong, only it is you learning in your life. It's not always the shortest way to go to one place to the other, from one point to the other, a straight line. Sometimes you have to bend in a certain way to go to that point. Now it took me all my life, about 50 years, to succeed to the United States. And I am going to tell you the story what was until in 1956 or 1957, January the 30th, I spotted the Statue of Liberty. It was exactly 50 years later, and that's my life. I couldn't come in 37 because I couldn't get a sponsor, only I wanted to get out from Hungary. And I became a very well-known display man in Hungary. The reason, because I was a little Jewish boy. The reason why I became a well-known, because one person was a famous window trimmer in Hungary, and he was drafted into the army. And he was an older person and he had a family. And he had children, and he was a freelance window trimmer. He was having stores every place and going in every time to trimming the windows. And he didn't want it to give to the competition because he was afraid he's going to lose it when he's going to come back. he's not going to have the business. He's going to lose that. So he had to find a young person who is enthusiastic enough and good enough to replace him until he is going to be on service. And this was already a 3 months period when he was drafted in. And he called me, and I took his place. I was that time already, we are writing 1938. And I took his stores and I was going there. Now everywhere they were expecting a grown-up person. And I was a 18 years old boy, only I looked like 16 or 14. And meantime, I have to tell you a little story about the Goldstein name. Because we changed our name. In 1936, it came a discrimination law in Hungary, where the Jews was limited already to work. In 1937, it came the second discrimination law, where Jews couldn't own a store. And officially, they didn't have stores. They hired a Gentile person who gave his name, and he was the official owner. And meantime, the Jews owned the store, only officially the Gentile person who got a existence, and he was the official owner. And that time already, Jews was very hard able to work. And because our artistic word, and we changed our name, and we changed our name to Zahav. The Zahav means in Hebrew gold. Or Goldstein was changed to Zahav to cover up our Jewishness, not because we were ashamed to be a Jews, just because the simple existence. We couldn't exist with the Goldstein name because nobody would hire us, especially a company who had to honor the discrimination law.
Sure.
And we were working as the Zahav brothers. My older brother and my oldest brother was working also in a Zahav name, and my name was Alfred Zahav. Better to say the nickname was Freddy. In the United States, Freddy is the Fredericks, only in Hungary the Alfred was Freddy. So I was the little Freddy everywhere, and I was well welcomed because I was doing my job even sometimes better than the previous window trimmer who I replaced. And I didn't care about the money because I didn't have time to spend it. And I was giving to his wife and his children, and the agreement was 50-50. And she got the 50% and I got the other 50%. This is the way I was helping already that time my parents through making a living, because there were very bad economic situation in Debrecen. And because I earned very well, I didn't have time to spend the money, and I was sending them and I was helping them. That time, I have to tell you again a little nuance, because I couldn't be a gymnast, I couldn't come to the United States. Only my middle older brother was that time already in France. He was studying in the architecture, École Architecture, in the School of Architects. And that time, in 1939, I decided I am going to go to France, to Paris, to study architecture and be a sculptor. every artist's dream was going to Paris to study. It is a very simple, again, a little nuance, it's which makes you, in whole your life, the difference. Again, it follows me the August the 20. August the 20 is a very famous high holiday in the Hungarian national history because the Saint Stephen Day is August the 20th. Saint Stephen was the first king in Hungary who was anointed in 999 by the pious Pope in Italy, and he was the Saint Stephen King, and that was his day of the Saint Stephen Day in the 19. After that, in every year, in August the 20th was the Saint Stephen Day. Now it's happened in the consulate, in the French consulate, honoring the Hungarian government holidays. There was a little sign on the consulate, sorry, our consulate is closed. We are open for business in 21st. So I was going in 21st to the consulate again, and I was able to go to the consul, and the consul was giving me back my passport and crossed with a red mark, avoid, because I couldn't get the visa, because in that night the Alsace-Lorraine started. They closed the German-French border. So I couldn't go to France, and even the consul said, young man, I am sorry, I can't give you the visa. If you would get here in August the 19th, you would get it and you would able to go through the border because you have a visa, only I can't give you today because the border is closed. Just one little nuance. I couldn't go to Paris. Meantime,
Stop there because you have to put another tape in.
okay. We are in 1939, August the 20th, and I couldn't go to France. Only meantime, I mentioned I was a good gymnast, and somebody gave me the idea, even previously in 1937, hey, you are a good gymnast, why don't you try, and you want to get out from Hungary, why don't you go in the theatrical field as an acrobat and a dancer, and you could get a visa and you could go out from Hungary because they are sending out the artist outland to give a good name for the Hungarian. And still today the Hungarian acrobats and the groups, dancing groups or theatrical groups, are going out from Hungary. They are getting a permission because they are giving a good name for the Hungarians. In the meantime, I started to be a acrobatic dancer. Meantime, I was working as a window trimmer, and meantime I was studying and having a training every day, 5 hours a day. I was learning to step dancing and acrobatic dancing, 5 hours daily. And I did this from 1937. And when I couldn't go to France as an artist, I was thinking to able to go out with a group or to getting an impresario, an agent who get me a contract, any other nightclubs or any place where artists and acrobats are dancing or playing, and I could go out from Hungary. I don't want to go into the detail how accidentally I got the passport, because there was already a discrimination and there was already a order, the age of from 16 you can't leave the country. In 1936 already the youngster couldn't go to Outland and couldn't get a passport, and especially couldn't get a passport, a Jew who wanted to go out to Hungary, because the discrimination. And I have to tell you again a little story about how I got the passport. The passport I got again in a just a little nuance, a little things which make all the time it is following my life, and I am going to repeat that so many times. It is the fate, it is in your hand all the time, you just don't know it. And the accident and the little things makes the big difference. When I was applying for a passport, I didn't have money, and you needed money to able to go in the labyrinth of the bureaucracy in Hungary. You all the time, you were making the bureaucracy wheel to roll a little bit better if you could smear a little grease, which means money. I didn't have the money. Only I was a innocent little guy, and I saw the sign where you could give in the asking the permit to go to get a passport, where you should go. And I didn't look. You should drop in to that slot, that mailbox, and actually it's going to go in the step of the bureaucracy up till to the top. And this was the top man's door where you have to drop in. So I didn't look that you drop in the slot. I was knocking the door. And I was going into the lion's mouth, the head of the chief of police. A little Jewish boy, again, going to the lion's cage, and the officials, you know, the policeman who was the, before you go into the chief, how you call it, the
guards?
Not the guard, the person who are asking why you came.
Receptionist?
Receptionist. The receptionist officer was asking, what do you want, young man? And I said, they were telling me to come here to Mr. Gömbös. That Gömbös, whose brother was the prime minister, and he was the police chief, the famous Helyes Gömbös group who was beating the Jews. And here I am, a little Jewish boy, telling to this officer, I was sent to Mr. Gömbös. No, he didn't know what is the truth and what was, because with the money, maybe some people was coming in, and he didn't know this is a poor boy or a rich boy, and he didn't know what was, it's a code cover just to say, and they let me in. It's very accidentally happened, and I went into the chief of police, who was the head, he was a guard. And he was asking, hey, what do you want from me? And I said, sir, here is my paper. I would like to have a passport to go out from Hungary for studying purposes. And he looked at me, and God knows what made him, he started to smile. Maybe my appearance or my innocent or my young look, I don't know. And he said, young man, where do you want to go? And I said, I want to go every place where I could study and I could learn. And I would like to go to France. Oh, he said, you would like to go to France? How about you would like to go to whole Europe? And I said, yes, I would like to go to whole Europe. And he said, here it is. Here is your passport. And I got the passport. And it was just exception 2 places. I couldn't go to Spain and I couldn't go to Russia. I got the whole Europe passport. My older brother, who was home back from Italy, when I was running home and I showed him I have the passport, he wouldn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. He said, how did you get it? He said, it takes years on the bureaucracy to able to get, and they are refusing 100 million times until you are trying to get and you got it. And I succeeded. I don't know what. This is the way I got my passport. And this is the way I couldn't use my passport because of the historical event in 1939. I couldn't go. I couldn't get the visa. And in a summer 1940, we had a final show in our gymnastic and dancing class. And in the theater where I made 2 numbers, a comical numbers, I was a acrobat, a comical acrobat. And I made a number and I had an acrobatic number. And on the audience, there were invited lots of agents, impresarios, they call them, talents, who they were looking, the talent hunters, who you could get very cheap, and the talented guy could get a good chance to go out to some place, and they are making lots of money with them because, you know, the beginners are the cheapest. If the stars are becoming a star, they are having a contract in very low rate, and they are making everybody, the agents are making the big business. And so happened in 1940 summer, I got a job in a Cairo Ritz hotel, a 3 months contract in the Ritz hotel, in the nightclub, with my number. Here is the opportunity. Little Freddy is going to go out from Hungary because the cloud was there already very dark. It was already the war going on. In 1939, the war was started with Poland. In 1940 June, it was going, the war already was, the flame is on. And in the last second, the little Freddy got a chance, and I got a job, I got a contract. I could go to Cairo for 3 months, which I never would come back to Hungary. I would be outland. I would be free. What happened? The Mediterranean became the war zone. I couldn't go out from Hungary. I couldn't go out with all the effort. 4 years I was studying and becoming a gymnastic acrobat and getting the fruit ripening, and when the fruit was ripe, I just was taking off the fruit of that 4 years sweat and blood, because it was sweat and blood for 4 years. 5 hours every day it's training. You think so it is easy when you are dancing or you are making an acrobatic dance in the theater and in the stage. It looks easy because you have a sweat on it, because you made 100 million times already. That's why it looks like easy. Only to look like easy, you have to have the training. And I paid 4 years, every day, 5 days, 5 hours a day. And finally, I got the contract. And I couldn't go because the war spread it into the Mediterranean, and we couldn't go because the Mediterranean becomes the war zone. And that was my tragedy, because that was my last chance to go out from Hungary. In 1940, October the 21st, I was drafted into the 4th Labor Battalion. And here it's coming actually the story what you people wanted to hear, only I had to give you the background, how I arrived to this point, to drafted into the army. And I was one of the first army-aged person who became discriminated in the Hungarian army because we couldn't bear arms. We had the uniform, only we were working into the army. We were doing the dirty work, and there was already flourishing the hatred everywhere, and the Jews were the point of the hate. And when they were taking us into the Hungarian army, we got a yellow armband. That was the first discrimination mark in Hungary, the first. And I have to tell you that was the dirtiest work what we had to. The older youth who was drafted into the army, they wanted to destroy us mentally, physically, and suffering in every way what your mind could figure out. The hatred was flourishing so much, and the people actually in the army, there were volunteers who became officers of the 4th Labor Battalion. They were volunteers to become a officer and under officer or sergeant or platoon commander. They were the most hateful. They were hated the Jews. First of all, they hated because the Jews were more educated. The Jews were the doctors, the lawyers, the architects, the intelligents, and those people who became our hangman. I don't know I am pronouncing in the right way. Hangman or henchman? Henchman. They were the uneducated who were very hard to spell our names because they couldn't even spell it Goldstein. They couldn't because they weren't educated, only they hated us so much. It was a pleasure for them to hating us and making us suffer. Now here I have to tell you again the experience what I had in the first day. Because of my look, I was a young-looking man, and the commandant who spotted me because of my look, and somehow I got the dirtiest uniform in the whole platoon, in the whole regiment. I was a little guy, and they, you know, even in the regular army, the drafted man was just getting thrown out. One shoe, one pants, one that. Even the normal soldier got whatever got. Only the Jews got the worst one, the selected worst clothes, the more ruined one, the dirtiest one, and we got their uniform. And because I was so little, and I was so young looking, and I had the most unfitted uniform in the whole platoon, they picked me out. The commandant, the lieutenant picked me out. Hey, that's little guy, what he is looking for here? Why he is here? We don't need little peanuts like that. And that time already I had a very bad system. I was talking too much. And I had to learn to not to talk. And I went out, standing out from the line, and salute the commandant, and I said, Mr. Commandant, I don't want to be here. You were calling me in. I didn't want it to come. You were drafting me, so why you are complaining why I am here? Oh, it is not enough you are here and you are having an unfitted uniform. You have a big mouth too. Okay, he called the sergeant. And I had to have a little workout with the sergeant. And I had a smiling face, and they didn't know under the unfitted clothes I was a gymnast. And started to make the workout, you know, to making push-ups 100 times. And he started to work me out in the separate place. And after, when I made my push-ups and when I made my exercise, whatever he wanted me to do, all the time he called me back. And, are you still smiling? And I said, sure, why I shouldn't smile? Okay, if you are smiling. He wanted to break me down in the first minute when I was in the army. They couldn't break me down physically. They couldn't break me down mentally. Finally, he gave up in the evening because I was, how you say it in English, when you are making every physical things, and in the army, I don't know what is the name, how you say it only. He was working me all afternoon, and I couldn't break. I was going through in mud, and I was climbing through in mud, and still I had the smiling face. And the next morning, when we had the wake, we had to be so fast right away because I was a window trimmer. I made my bed the most beautiful one. And the sergeant came to look how is everybody's bed was made up, you know, and everybody was standing there. I am not using the right word because I don't know how you call it.
Standing at attention?
It was standing in attention, and everybody was looking the beds and how the blanket was folded and how the bed sheet was folded and how was everything in order.
Inspection.
And it was in the inspection, and mine was the best one. Now the same sergeant who was working the other day, the previous day, 4 hours working out, and he couldn't break me. And he said, oh, you are again. you're going to stay here in that room and make every bed like that. Because he wanted to our room to look the best, because the commandant inspection was coming 12 o'clock, and the sergeant wanted to have the best room. That was my luck, because I didn't have to go out to do the heavy dirty work. I was playing inside and making the bed most beautiful. Every blanket was in order, and I was finishing already 10:30. The whole room, I think so, there was at least 100 bed. I finished. It was my profession. I was a window trimmer. I was making the best things. And he was shaving that time the platoon commandant, a sergeant. And he was a typical good sergeant. Good, quotation mark. He said, "Are you standing here? Why you are standing? Why you are not doing your work?" And I said, "Sir, I am finished. I don't have anything to do." I said, "What do you mean you don't have anything to do? I gave you work." And he said, "Select, everybody had a luggage, a army luggage. It was wooden, only it was different sizes. One person had a little one person had the big one. And I was a fresh, and I was just a determined little guy." And he said, "Okay, pick a luggage." And I picked the largest one. After I found out this guy's father was a butcher, and all the good food and everything was on that luggage, because they wanted to send their dear son to have everything, the good food. So he started to make me a little exercise. Lift up the luggage above your head and go down into your knee and walk that way. And he figured out every things, and he exercised me at least more than an hour, until the officer was coming to inspect the room. And he couldn't break me. He said, "You are going to be my adjutant." I was winning again. I was cleaning his boots. It was so shiny. I shined the boots. Never in his life he had such a beautiful shoe. Only I learned this because I was a window trimmer. I was spit shining the shoes what we were putting into the window, which never was so shiny when the customer got it. Only I learned that. That was my profession. Again, it's helped me because I did my best. And it's helped me. Only it's give me a hard time. Only in the hard way I learned to exist. So this way I got a career in the first week on the army, and I was the first one who had a leave. After 2 weeks, I got the leave, and I was able to go out to Budapest. And I have to tell you, they changed my uniform, because the officer said after, you can't disgrace the Hungarian uniform to have a clothing like that. So they sent me to the warehouse with a special instruction, give him the best uniform. So when the warehouse guy got the paper again, I got the brand new uniform. Only it was ill-fit. There was a tailor in our battalion, and I asked him, "Hey, can you fix that for me, to fit for me?" And I was one of the best dressed soldier, and they let me out. Only I had my yellow band. The yellow band was the discrimination. Only we were working in Hungary 1 more years. Now, my dear father, who I visited all the time to Debrecen, he was telling me, until you are inland, you are safe. He had the foresight already to hear about what happening in the battlefield. We were already in war because Hungary was the ally to Germany and the Eastern Front was advancing. So we were working in a very hard situation. We were working where animal couldn't work. We were working where machinery couldn't work. We were working in the border where we had our norma. We had to laboring certain amount and we had to walk, and they were stealing our food. We were suffering mentally, physically by hunger. Only we could manage because we were in inland, and every Jewish boy got from the parents a little help. And if you had a parents who wasn't able to send you a little help, you were making. For example, I was physically well and I was doing my work one of the best and fastest, and I got a permit from the commandant, and I smeared the sergeants to able to sell little chocolate bars. So my brother was sending me chocolate bars, and I was selling to them the chocolate bars who had money, and I made my livings a little bit better, because if I had money, I was going to the peasant's house and I purchased a little milk and a little cheese and a little fruit and so, and I made it and I managed better. Only already we were suffering physically and mentally. Only there was no problem until 1941, November, we were sent to the Eastern Front. And the Eastern Front was advancing, and when we arrived to Belgorod, the officer of our battalion was standing up in a little higher spot and announcing, "You Jews," we were already in Russia, "you Jews are not going to back to Hungary, just your dog tag going to go back. You going to stay here and you never go back to Hungary." That was the greeting. Now, that time, we youngsters were coming already to the battlefield where we were doing the dirty works. The dirty works which there was already forced labor battalions older than we are, only we were coming to refill the old battalions who was already missing. Lots of people died by hunger, died by execution, by beating, and missing the clothing. And we were coming to fill up those battalions. And in Belgorod, our battalion was made up to platoons, and one platoon was about approximately 45 person, and we were going to directed with a platoon commander to go to one battalion, and we are going to stay with this battalion to fill up because they were already missing, died by hunger, died by suffering, and so and so. That time I had the experience already in the battlefield of the partisan movement. And the Russians who were working for the Germans also, and they were sympathetic with us because they knew the Jews are drafted by force. And that's why we were working on the battlefield, not because we were Nazis, we were the victim of the Nazis already. So in the Eastern Front, the Germans and the Hungarians actually was using us as a shield. I don't know, I am making myself clear, because the partisan movement, or the Jews, or the Russians, or the Polish, they knew already what the forced labor battalions are doing. It gives you the name, is the title, forced labor. We were forced to work there. So we were the same victims as the Russians or Polish or the Polish Jews or anybody. And we were working under commandos of the Hungarians, which they were actually worse than the teachers. The Hungarians in the battlefield were worse than the Germans. Actually, we were happier to work under the German commandos than the Hungarians, because the Hungarians hated us worse than the Germans. The Germans, because they were soldiers. The Hungarians were hating us because we were Jews, and we were Hungarian Jews, and we were in their eye privileged. And I could tell you stories, only I am not going to go into the little details how they hated us. Actually, when we were looking for our battalion, they welcomed us and they said, "Oh, you belong here." And they were using us, sending us out to the working in the battlefield and picking mines with a piece of stick, or bringing the deads and cleaning the stables and doing the dirtiest work what your imagination is not can imagine what we were doing there. They wanted to break us completely down with spirit and with physical, and I can't emphasize that how they succeeded. And they succeeded because the next day they were telling us, "Hey, you don't belong here." They used us to working there because they used our strength, because the other battalion who were weak already from the suffering and from the hunger, they didn't produce the work. So we were young and refilling the battalion, and after they were telling, "You don't belong there." And we were searching our battalion almost a year. We were going one battalion to the other. This way I was once decimated. I don't know I am using the right word or not. The decimated means they counted the battalion lined up, and they put the doctor in first, and every 10th person was standing out, and they were executed 29 people that way from this battalion, because they were punished. 2 persons was missing from the battalion. And it's called deciment, or how you call every 10th person is selected to die.
Yes, as a reprisal.
Yes. And that way, and even we didn't belong to this battalion, and I was the number 4. And that time, it was in 1942. We are writing 1942. And 29 person was killed front of my eye, shot. And we were going out to working in the battlefield. That time we were working already on the Don River. That's where is the Voronyezh battlefield. The famous Voronyezh battlefield was by the Hungarians. We were working in that spot, and we found the 2 person who was missing, who was beaten up by the henchmen, beaten dead, and they were coming back and telling to the commandant the 2 persons was missing, just to use one more way to destroy our spirit and physically us to destroy. That way 29 person was dead by the firing squad, and 2 person was dead by beating them dead. So this kind of situation I lived through. I was hanged, for example, because I was selling my shirt to the Russians for 2 potatoes. And they found out I was involved with the Russians, and I was making business with them, and they hanged me by my hand. And it was winter, and when I lost my conscience, they spilled me water on, cold water, and they let me off, only I was blue, and the comrades was rubbing me to life, and I existed, and I stayed alive because my physical condition still was good, and the determination, my life, it was perfect. And I said to myself all the time, I am not going to be destroyed. No way, not physically, not mentally. And this is the way I succeed. In 1942, December, I was staying outside of the Ukraine winter. We were working daytime on the field, and we were working on the number 21 highway. We were cleaning the highway and making the snow walls. And again, in the ingenuity of the Jews, it is a little experience I have to tell you how we were cleaning the snow in the number 21C highway. And we were working day, and we sleeping at night on the snowfield. So we didn't had warm clothes. We had just the blanket already, because the families from Hungary who was sending the packages, we never got it. The henchmen and the people were taking it. We were having the blanket as a skirt we used, and the belt was holding the blanket, and we didn't have anything under. We didn't have clothing because we were out the summer clothes, and in winter, whatever we had, the belongings, we put it on. And we slept under the sky, on the cold, and we survived with the determination. Matter of fact, that time I started to be blind. from the snow and night from the fire. Only in the fire, we were sitting by the fire, and it is a famous scene in 1943 when the Stalingrad offense started by the Russians. It started in November 1942. Only we were captured in 1943, January the 12th. And if I wouldn't be captured, I wouldn't be alive today, and I wouldn't able to tell the story, what happened. Only because my determination to survive and to able to make a living, whatever food we could the hand on, and that's why when I was selling my shirt just to have 2 more potatoes and sitting by the fire, and after have a willpower to sleep on the snow, and evening I was taking off all my clothing and I was making a sleeping bag from my blanket. And as naked as I am, how I was born, I was climbing into the sleeping bag, and that's why I survived actually, because the people were freezing dead who was sitting by the fire, and you fall asleep at the fire, and the fire is dying out because nobody was giving fire and wood, so you were sleeping and dying by death by the freezing to death. And in the morning I didn't freeze to death because I had the blanket under and above me, and the warmth of my body was keeping me alive. And in the morning I get out, I had the willpower, rub myself, the whole my naked body on the snow, which gave me a blood circulation, and I put it back, my clothing, everything, and I felt wonderful. And this is the way I survived. And when I heard the loudspeaker of the Russians, because we were going on the Don River, the same river the Russians were coming to get water, and we were having a ice cut out, and well, the Hungarian army people was going on the same water, and the Russians knew we had already civilian cloud, because when we were taking from Hungary to Russia, we had just the cap, the army cap, and we had the civilian clothing with the yellow band. And the Russian loudspeaker was telling us, Jews, come over. Here you're going to be free. You are going to be equal. Come over. Don't suffer there. Come over. Only we couldn't go over because if somebody was missing, we had already the experience, we endangered the other comrades. So the comradeships, we were holding together and fighting together and helping each other to be together and not to betray and go for your saving your life and endangering the others. So you couldn't go over. Only when the Germans' line broke, and it is very interesting how is the German lines broke in that area, the number 21 highway. There was 2 Italian divisions. and the Italians wanted to do everything just not to fight in the Russian winter. And the Russians knew the weakest part of that line, and they broke the line. And in 1943, January the 12th, I had been captured by the Russians. And here I have to tell you the irony to being a Jew in Hungary and the victim being a Jew in Hungary and victim for the Nazis. Because you are Jewish, you suffer 2 years because you were Jew. Now it's coming some irony of the isms, the communisms and the Nazisms. My life was following all these isms. And because I was a Jew in Hungary, I was drafted into the forced labor battalion. Only because I was a Jew, I wouldn't bear arms, and I was in the forced labor, and the forced labor, they used us to destroy our spirit and everything. And now I thank my life to the Russians. Only I got captured not as a Jew. I was captured by the army as a prisoner of war. And it is a very simple way to say we got the equality. Only we got the equality, we became Nazis. We became the same Nazi as the German soldier, as the SS Nazi. The Jews became a prisoner of war, and 6 years I spent in Russia as a prisoner of war. And sure, it is a damn it was their right, because we became equal. The first partisans, when the battlefield broke, it was not the military who came first. The civilians, partisans came first. And we were greeted by the civilian partisans, and they said, "Hey, comrade, you are..." And we got hugged by the Russians, and they said, they gave us tobacco, and they gave us paper, and smoked together, and they took off the yellow band from our arms, and we became equal to them, and they hugged us. Only one problem happened. The next one, because they said, "Oh, just go back." And they let us go because they didn't know what to do with us. Only the next partisan who didn't see the yellow band, the armband, the machine gun was working. And one of the friend of mine was killed right front of me because he was greeting the Russians, and he said, "Viva Stalin." He was a young communist in Hungary. He was a member of the Communist Party member. And he was killed by a Russian bullet front of my eye. And we were telling him, "Hey, you know what you killed? You killed a comrade of yours. He was a communist." And he was telling "Viva Stalin" in Hungarian. And you killed him. That was his last word. He said, "How should I know? I didn't know. I thought he's a Nazi." Because you are a Nazi. You were fighting against us. And we were explaining to him, we didn't fight against you. We were the victim as the same like the other Russians in the forced labor. We were working for the Germans. So after we had a habit everywhere where we saw a dead Jews, we didn't say it took anything, we took the yellow band. We took in our pocket and we put on the yellow band, and this is the way we survived day by day. When we were greeted in the army, oh comrade, you don't need that here, took off. So the machine gun didn't work. It was a helping arm. And when we passed them, again we put it back the yellow band. This is the system, the surviving the situations. This is what keep me alive, and the believing I am going to survive. And this is the way I got captured, and officially, I think so it was in January, the end of January, when they were actually took us and numbered, you know, when they are captured and they are saying how many military was captured and how many prisoners we had, and that was the official date. And again, there is a little little episode which is not so happy. It is happened from a little nuance. When they were registering us, you know, Jews from Hungary, how many German soldiers, how many Hungarian soldiers, we became soldiers. We became Hungarian soldiers. You understand the irony of this whole situation? This is the irony to being a Jew until we were a Jew and we were blamed. No, we are a Nazi. And we are blamed for the Nazi regime because they said you didn't fought against the Nazi regime. How could we? With the shovel? When we overpowered? How could we fight? So that was the official point. Only when they were registering and writing up how many Jews from Hungary, the little officer girl said, oh, what is your name? Alfred Goldstein, Jew in Hungary. So he translated my translation in Hungarian, what I said, he translated to Russian. And she said, oh, you are a Еврейский Hungarian. The Еврейский Hungarian means in Russian Hungarian Jew.
Yeah.
That's a little nuance. I was a Jew from Hungary. I wasn't a Hungarian Jew. Only she translated that way, and I didn't know what's the difference. Hungarian Jew or Jew from Hungary is going to be a different. Vengerski Yevrej or Yevrej is Vengria. I paid 5 years for that. I'm going to tell you the story, what it is. So I was registered Yevrejski Vengri, so a Hungarian Jew. And that time I felt a privilege to be Jew. The officer, the Russian officer, who was administering the capturing of the Germans, and that time they were taking away everything, the guns and everything. And I didn't have nothing, only I had a little knife in my pocket, and I took out my pocket and I hold it in my hand. Only the yellow band was in my arm. And that officer was directing the soldiers, leave the pocket knife to this guy. He was Jewish. That Russian officer was Jewish. And evening I was talking to him. He was speaking Yiddish. That was the first time when I I was sorry. I didn't listen my father. I couldn't talk to him as Jew. And he was a Jewish officer, and that was why I was able to keep my knife, my pocket knife. And this is the way I privileged. Once I was the first time I privileged myself, a Jew, how privileged is I had the knife. They didn't know what to do with the Jews and what to do with the soldiers. The army was advancing so fast. They captured so many German soldiers. It was a disarray in the Russian army, and they couldn't take care of us. Now we started, the living experience started to work, the psychology. We had a little group, and one was a tailor, the other guy who spoke very good Russian, and I was the artist. And we created a little group, and we started to begging from villages to villages, to offering our work and for food. This is the way we survived all these months until April the 1st. Only I have to tell you a little episode of this wandering. 2 episodes I am going to tell you. It is very important because it's going to show the humanity, and it's going to show determination of me to living, to able to tell you the story. And that time already I had the mind, I made up my mind, if I am not going to get shot, I am going to survive. So when Hitler was finishing the sentence, we going to raise the Jews from the world, I said to myself that time, you are not going to succeed, and you are not going to destroy me, because I am a Jew. I am not going to be destroyed.
And we're going to change another tape.
Oh, we are on?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So I am going back to the place we were wandering and begging for food, and we were offering our work. Now in the battlefield and all this area, there was lots of military clothes, and the people didn't have clothing. And because a tailor was our friend, it is show how is the willingness, how you are operating in your own. We had in the group one who was speaking Russian. I was the artist. I was making portrait, and you have to know the Russian people. You have to make a division between the Russian government and the Russian people. The Russian people is one of the most warm-hearted people in the world. It is entirely different than the government. The Russian government party membership still 2% was in 1940s. And 98% was the people. So the Russians, we were knocking the door, and the housewife who was opening the door, right away in the first minute, we could find out the mother who had a child in the battlefield or not. If they had 2 potatoes, one was yours. And this is the way it is happened. This is the way we lived through that area, that time, because we were working and we were welcomed for our labor, because the man was on the war and all people was home, and the housewife would use the youth, and we were Westerners. The ladies, the young ladies were loving us. I was the artist. I was making portrait, and the Russians loved the artist. The hudожник, it is a Russian word. The hudожник could be a god. They gave me everything, and when they were asking, do we have photographs? And we had photographs, and we showed the photographs. They were melting. They were already all girlfriends. We could get anything, the best from the Russians, because we were Westerners and we were coming from the outland. It was isolated Russia. And we got everything. Now, I was making the portrait. The friend of mine was the interpreter, and the other friend of mine was the tailor. So we were starting to make clothing. And this is the way we survived in a certain point. Once we were put into the army was capturing the fleeing prisoner of wars and trying to put it into the camps. We were getting away from the camps because we knew in the camps the people died by hunger, by typhus. I was, for example, in a camp in Krenovoya where 18,000 people died by hunger. And there was actually cannibalism. The Italians were selling the human flesh. And the people were buying by hunger. And I have to tell you a little episode again, what it means to me, the money. There was one man who was begging for not disinfected water, for a clear glass of water. The open wells was infected because the people were falling in, sliding in from the ice, and it was infected. So you couldn't drink the water, you couldn't suck the snow because it was infected. So you were offering everything for a glass of clear water. And this human being, which is I am picturing till today, I can't forget, he had a money belt in his cloth under it. It was saved, and it was a zipper on, and it was gold rings, diamonds, everything, and he was offering everything just to get a glass of water. We found him the next day on the floor. All the gold was rolling out from his hand, and died by hunger and died by typhus, and he couldn't save himself with all the wealth what he had. He couldn't purchase a glass of water. And this is the episode which, after that, it meant to me a lot, because after I reminded persons, even here in Columbus, Ohio, what is the money means to me. It is just a tool, an existing tool to survive, to buy valuable things. It is just a thing, only it is not everything. And this is the episode which I had experienced. So we were running away and sneaking out from the camps and going to villages. In one situation, we were marching, and we were captured, and we were marching 5 days and 5 nights. We were driven by the Russians, and the prisoner of march started, and we were counted on, and I don't know how many thousands of people were there. Only my willingness to survive, I had to be the first one. We were marching in the Don River, on the ice of the Don River, only it was snowed in because of the banks was higher, and the Germans were hitting the banks. So the Russians didn't want to lose the prisoner of wars. They were putting us in the valley of the river, and we were walking on the snowfield, the virgin snowfield. and the Russian officer was going first, and I was going in his path the second. Behind me there were hundreds or thousands. I don't know how many. Only one thing I knew. I have to be the first one, because if I am not going to be the first one, somebody going to push me down, and I am not on the end. I knew that there is the firing squad, because for them it was important just the number. Dead or alive, it doesn't matter. If it was 2,000 there, 2,000 has to be on the next spot, which the officer is responsible. Dead or alive, it has to be that counted one, because we were counted for. So it was in my mind, I have to be the first one, and I was keeping pace in the front of the line. The friend of mine who spoke Russian, he wasn't physically so fitted, and he was begging me, Freddie, just let me sit down a little bit. Now, if you are sitting down in the winter, you fall asleep. You sit down and you fall asleep. On the end of the line, if you are sleeping, you dead, or you froze to death, or you shot to death. So that time, I even wasn't thinking. The reason why I am telling you that, because one of my first statue I made, it's called the ultimate friendship. I grabbed him like a maniac. I wasn't thinking, and I said, you, and I was cursing him, you are not going to stay here, you are going to come with me. And it is the reason in back of my mind. I don't think so because I was so eminent and so human being. It is the surviving, because he was my tongue. He spoke Russian. Said, you, and I was cursing him, you are not going to stay here, you are going to come with me. And I put him in my shoulder. I carried him in my shoulder more than 24 hours on the virgin snow, 5 days march, without giving food and without giving drink. We marched 5 days and 5 nights. And if somebody is telling me, you can't walk and sleep, I deny that. Because you could walk and sleep. And you are walking and sleeping meantime. Only your determination to going in the rhythm, you are going. And the first food, I have to tell you that, when we were walking through in a village, and probably from pictures you saw it, how they are driving the prisoner of wars. It is a herd, and the people are standing, the villagers are standing by the column. And in Russia, everybody was eating sunflower seeds. They were famous. They put one handful in their mouth and just spitting out the shells and eating the sunflowers. And one old lady, a housewife, I don't know why, I was the privileged one who was walking on the column and in the beginning, and she handed to me a handful of sunflower seed. And this was the first food after 5 days by sunflower seed. And since then, whenever I am going to the food market and I see the sunflower seeds, it's always I am reminded what it means, a sunflower seed to eat. And in the evening, because this is already, again, it's coming, we become a victim again of the Nazis, and we are victim of the hatred by the communists. They were driving us not giving us food. 5 days, 5 nights we went through, and finally, you know, in the beginning they took away from us everything, and they gave us a barrel of soup. A barrel. Do you know what is this mean to hungry people, to give a warm soup, and you don't have a spoon, you don't have a dish? You were greeted like animals. And you know what happened? I didn't eat a drop of soup, because the people, just like a herd, was running and stumbling through the barrels, and the barrel was broken and the content was flowing everywhere, and everybody was eating the snow which contained the soup, and I was standing away from that herd, and I told to myself, I am still a human being. I am not going to go down to eat the snow and filled with it, because of to giving us like not humans. And after a day later we got bread, and that time we got bread, it was frozen like the concrete. We didn't have knife. Only little Freddy had a knife. And I went to the fire and I started to cut off the bread which was melting by the fire. Only what happened, from the exhausted march, I fell asleep. Only I knew that the bread has to be under my head, because everybody is going to steal my bread, because it was eatable. I fell asleep. What happened? I ate just a little bread, the other was stolen from me until I was sleeping. So this kind of situation we went through, and getting away from the columns, sneaking away from the columns, because we didn't want to go to camps, because in the camps you were dying. And we were well fed by their housewives whenever we were working. And in one place we were staying, and there was a doctor, a lady doctor, and she was Jewish. And she found out we are Jewish. And she gave us work, only she couldn't take us in the house because she had a little house. My interpreter, who I saved, he was living in another house, and the tailor and me was living in the doctor's house, because she didn't have enough space. Now that time the city chief of police, the little village chief of police, was coming to the doctors all the time in the evening, and he started to talk with us, and we became very friendly with them. And the interpreter was coming over, and sometimes he didn't come over. He was a good-looking boy, a very good-looking boy, and the house where he was staying, she was a young teacher. So it started a little romance there. He spoke very good Russian. He was a good-looking. The young lady was taking the risk to getting acquainted and close friend to a prisoner of war. And he was there, and we lived in the doctor's house. And one evening, the chief of police, and we started to, to break the language barrier. We started to learn the common words, bread and whatever it was necessary. And he came one evening, And he pulled the gun. And he said, "Oh, you son of a bitches, you spies. You are German spies." And, you know, we couldn't say a word. And we said, "Look, go and call this boy. He is in the next house. And he is going to clean us out. We are prisoner of wars. Only we were in the forced labor battalion, and we were civilians." And here is coming the problem. And he said, "Empty your pocket." And he changed. He was entirely a drastic military man. He forgot already we ate in one table together, and we were telling the story how victimized we were by the Nazis. And the next day, he is telling me, "Jew, 2 years I suffered by the Germans. I am a German spy." And he said, "Emptied your pocket and emptied your belongings." I had a little bag in my back. I had my tefillin. I had my prayer book with me. I had a talis. And it showed everything. I am a Jew. Only in the photograph, it showed I was in a military uniform in Hungary. And he said, "Who is this? This is not you. You are a military man." And I started to explain. It didn't help. They took us into the jail. We were there in the jail, and the next day started the interrogation by this commandant and the political bureau. And you know how they are putting the reflector in your eye, and you go in, and we had to strip down completely. And they were asking the interpreter. Only the teacher didn't let him to come. We couldn't use, so my effort, I saving him, it didn't do me any good, and he didn't come to covering us up. They found the other interpreter, and we started to tell them, "Look, we are Jews, and we are not spy. Whatever we have," I had a pilot hat. Only I had a pilot hat because I found a dead pilot, and that was the first thing what I took off, because I didn't have a warm hat. And he said, I had a map, I had the photographs, I had the pilot hat, everything is fit. Just my story didn't fit. And my belonging didn't fit because it showed I was a Jew. And I was naked there again. I said, "I am a Jew." And I spotted that time already the firing squad was lining up in the jailhouse. There was a stone wall, and there was a 12-man firing squad. And they sent us out naked. And we were standing by the wall. That was the moment in my life I gave up. And I said, "Freddie, goodbye. This is it." The guy was standing inside in the window. He was playing with his gun, a Colt. I never forget. A Colt was in his belt. He was playing with the Colt. And the firing squad was waiting for his command. We were shivering there naked, the tailor and me, standing in the winter. Somehow, I don't know what happened inside. Only the command didn't came. It came a command to get the firing squad away and bring us back. I don't know, it is the prayer book or his conscious or the story what we were telling. I don't know what changed his mind. Only we were put back into the jail. We were there with collaborators, and lots of collaborators were that time in Ukraine. And girls who were collaborating with the German soldiers. We were jailed in for 2 days. Once they called us. This is the irony. Again, you can figure it out. They gave us all the belongings. An old soldier, a National Guard, old guy, was guiding us out from the village. We didn't know where they are taking us. And he said, okay, go whenever you want to. I said, what? We were afraid to walk away because we were afraid maybe they're going to shut us in the back. The old guy turned back and went back to the village. We couldn't figure it out. They let us free. Again, I am telling you that time we were wandering only whatever communist song we knew and whatever Russian word and greetings, we were greeting every Russian. Здравствуйте, здравствуйте. It was everything. We were singing the internationally and singing the peace song and everything, whatever we knew, just not to capture it. And this is the way we saved our life. And in April the 1st, are you following?
Yes.
This is 3 months. April the 1st came a order from Moscow. All the prisoner of war has to be in camps. They organized themselves, the Russians. And that time they captured us and they took us into a camp. And it is Krasnoyarsk. It was a place, and I was a well-fed, strong little fellow, because the Russians were feeding us. I was working, and I loved to work. I always was the best worker, and everywhere where I was working, I was doing the best. I learned that in my life, and it is followed me all in my surviving. Do your best. And when we were going to this camp, it was a bunker camp. Under the ground, covered with earth and hay. And when we were taken into this bunker, the smell hit us. There were thousands and thousands dead in the bunkers. Dark bunkers where thousands and thousands died. And they were taking us there to clean the camps, to bury the deads, because it's April came and the thaw came. The frozen dead, they couldn't keep in above ground. They had to bury it. And there was typhoid victims, Jews, Germans, Hungarians, everybody. One thing I have to tell you, we started to clean up this camp, and we made a big pile of tefillin. Like a hay pile, big pile of tefillin, and prayer books, and talis. So many Jews were dying there. It gave, and in the morning, in the camp, all the time, one guy was coming from the warehouse, from the food warehouse, and he was selecting workers. It was again my willingness to survive. With all the dead, we were pulling them and falling out the dead from the arm it was half rotten, dead people there, thousands and thousands, and we had to dig holes and bury them. If I am going to do this work, that's going to be terrible. I am going to get the typhoid. The lice was so thick on the clothing. Whatever we found, I never forget a sweater, which was a maroon sweater, and it was gray from the lice. You didn't see the color of the sweater. So you get lice and you get typhoid. You have to survive somehow. And this man was selecting strong people who are going to work in the warehouse. And the warehouse was a food warehouse. I am the little guy, and I said, I am going to work in the warehouse. I am going to do the best. I am coming. Okay, little guy, come with me. That way I saved myself a little bit late. I was working so much, I never forget, I was working with the meat, the frozen meat. Half of a cow I was carrying in my shoulder, and grain. And he was selecting me every day. Every morning I was coming in the camp. Daytime I was working in a warehouse. And hey, little fellow, because I was valuable to him. And one day he gave me the reason I have to tell you this story, because it comes out the system of the Russians. How is the system is working? Because there is a order. If the order is coming from the top, they're going to execute exactly how is the order is saying it. So he wanted to have his best work. He selected me. And one day he was telling me he was taking to one room. There was 100 sack of wheat. And he was telling me this 100 sack of wheat has to distribute it to the other room. Because this has to be something else, and this has to be taken. The 100-pound sack of wheat, I myself was carrying on my shoulder, putting on, taking to the other room, and I worked my little rear end off on that day, and the 100 sack was transferred from one room to the other. Only because it was April and it is spring, even in Ukraine, in Russia, started to have the beautiful weather, and I was sweating. I was working so much, and there was one pumping well. And I went to the pumping well, and I don't know you know it or not, only I have to tell you, the wheat has the little sticker stuff, you know, and it has a tendency, if it goes to your skin, it goes inside, like pinching you. And because I was carrying, take off my shirt, and I was carrying half naked the sack of wheat from one place to the other, I got this little sticky stuff on my skin. And I wanted to wash it off because it was itching. And I was sweating, and I was working, and it was beautiful sunshine, and stupidly I went to pumping water, and I pumped water, and I washed off myself to clean myself from that sticking stuff. And I got a cold. And the next day, I got a temperature. No, I was working in a warehouse, and the people who was coming from the so-called quotation mark from the hospital, it was a makeshift hospital, a school, where people were dying by the typhus and typhoid. Thousands were dying. And everybody was telling to avoid to go to the hospital. And the lady, the nurse who was coming to getting the food for the hospital, she knew me already because I was carrying to the truck the stuff and we get acquainted. And I was working so diligently, we got acquainted with the lady. And the lady was coming to the camp every morning to selecting the sick to taking to the hospital because they were getting typhoid and everything. Every sickness was coming up there. What happened? In the morning, she was coming and she saw me in a high fever. I got a cold. And I said, "Sister, don't take me to the hospital. I am going to be all right. Just take me to the warehouse and I am going to work a little bit and just keep me there to not to take me." And I was privileged by her. She was keeping me a couple of days to not to taking to the hospital. And after she said, "I am sorry, I can't cover myself anymore because you are having a high fever. You are getting a 40-42, which is centigrade. You know, it is called like the 104. I can't keep you here. I can't take the risk. I have to take you to the hospital." Now, the so-called hospital, I was taken there, and there is a regulation. You have to have a bed before you are entering to the hospital. Only that time already there were certain henchmen who spoke Russian, the Ukraine collaborators, and when the doctor was telling me I have to take off my clothing because it's filled up with lice, I have to enter naked through one room where I am taking a bath, quotation mark again, a bath, because it is the regulation. And they took me there and they poured me 2 buckets of cold water on my hot body. Sure, I was high temperature. I was walking naked on that school hallway. The doctor, who is so-called was doctor, she was telling me in Russian, "Panos, yes." Panos means, in a Russian word, panos means in Hungarian, complain. It is the little word. And I said, "No, I don't have any complaint." And she said, "You don't have panos." Panos is, in Russian, diarrhea.
Oh.
I didn't have, because if you had typhoid, sorry to say it, unpleasant, only you had diarrhea. And she said, "You have panos?" And I said, "No." And I was going. The next one was approached me, and I still was naked, walking on the hallway, because you had to be entered in the hospital stark naked, and after you get something, if you get something. Only that was a kind of hospital where you didn't get nothing. Only I got the next doctor who said, "Oh, you have panos." And she spotted on my stomach the red spots. Sure, I had red because I had high fever. And I still was strong, only she had 2 henchmen with a big stick. And she was telling in Russian to them to get me and throw me into the room, so-called hospital room, which didn't have a bed. And when they opened the door, it was a classroom, a makeshift hospital. Everybody was laying on the floor naked, and some of them dead, some of them dying, and the field and everything was the people laying there. How you see the pictures? That hit me, my face, the smell, and I fought against it. I still was strong, determined to not to able to go into, and I said, I was yelling, I don't have, I am not typhus, I don't have typhoid, and I put my 2 legs on the angle of the door, and I hold in the door jamb my hand strong until somebody hit me with a big stick, and I collapsed. And they throw me in. Certainly I got the typhus. Here it's coming again. I had a typhoid. Everybody was dying like the flies. I still was strong. And I determined myself, I am going to go to the toilet. I am not going to mess up myself here. And I was walking down to the first floor in the school. There is the collective toilets. There was the dead people in a crossway piling up like frozen deaths, columns, 3 laying this way and 3 laying this way, and a column. And I saw that. And there was the mess. You were walking onto your ankle in your own field. Only I still determined I am going to this place and not to make it in my own place. I determined, and it took me sometimes a half a day to walk down and half a day to come back, because in my mind I was strong, only physically I wasn't strong anymore. And I had dreams when they gave us a little black bread. I was thinking about my dear mother's chocolate cake, and I had to eat, and I sold my bread for a rope. I still was naked, and I made a business, and I bought from one henchman who was selling German overcoats, military overcoats, and I bought one. And that saved me again to cover myself and laying on the floor, and I had a warmth, and I had the determination to survive. The people who managed to sitting by me, and they were waiting for my ration, to eat my ration, they were talking, and I was daydreaming, oh, guy is not going to make it tomorrow, we're going to eat his food. You know, the vultures are there, everywhere. I said to myself, nobody is going to take me. I am not going to be the man who's dying, who's going to be like that. I am not going to be. And thank God, I was in that school more than 13 days. And typhus was calming. You know, I went through on the crisis. And I started to get stronger. Only there was one commotion in the whole school, and everybody was going from that school, emptying. There was an order, they have to empty this hospital. And when the doctor came selecting the people, I was selected to stay there with the deaths and with the sick who can't make it. That was one movement again in my life. It was everything is empty on that building. I was in the 2nd floor. I saw the last wagon leaving the camp. It was 3 men on it and taking the food, and the bakers, all the strong ones, was going to the railroad station. And the last effort of my life, I jumped out from the floor and I ran after that wagon. And I went to this wagon and I was taken to the railroad station. And that was my luck, because I was the end of the whole transport, and there was, everybody was already in the cattle cars, 40 men, and the last cattle car was empty. And there was 13 people, the bakers, the strong ones, and me, with the German rope on me and the string as a belt. I was there, and I am telling to myself, I am strong and I have to hold on, and not to show it, I am sick. And they took me into this wagon, that cattle car. And the luck was for us, because we was 13, not 40. And still, in the last effort, I wanted to be the first one who is jumping on that cattle car. And I managed. And I went up on the bunk bed, and you know, the little window with the barbed wire, probably you saw pictures. I wanted to get the fresh air. I went to the bunk, because I didn't know how many people is going to be in the cattle car. I didn't know it's going to be 13. And I saved myself, and I was getting fresh air. Only on the train started to roll, and more than 24 hours we didn't get nothing. No food, no nothing. From the healthy guys, there were about 3 died. The others were messing themselves in that place where they were, and we couldn't get out because it was locked, the wagon, and the guard was walking on the top of the roof of the train. And we were knocking the doors, and we were crying out for food and for water. We didn't get nothing. In 24 hours later, once the train stopped, and they gave us food. Damn it, they gave us salt fish, was cooked with wheat, kasha, the famous food what you are eating today, the healthy food. This is what they gave us, cooked with salt fish, and they didn't give us water. We ate the salt food, and just more than a day later we got water. And that way we were rolling slowly and slowly.
Where was the train going?
The train, we didn't know. One morning, the train, how many days, I don't know exactly. Only I know it was springtimes, and it was early May when the train stopped. And here comes the irony of the Russian system. The half of the train was dead and sick. The other half was so sick they couldn't move. When I looked out in the dawn, it's in what early morning, the train stopped in a railroad station. What a beauty you saw there. There was about, I don't want to lie to you, at least 100 nurses with white uniform, with a white head dress, with a red cross on, and the red cross on the arm. There was a lineup of nurses. And they knocked the door, and they said in Russian, "Panos, yes?" I was yelling out, "No, no, we don't have panos." The panos they wanted to separate the people who had diarrhea and who had. They opened the door, and the strong man, Alfred Goldstein, was the strong man. And I said, I am healthy. I don't have any panas. Panas, I said in Hungarian, and I said the whole thing in Hungarian, only that one word, the panas, meant in Russian diarrhea, and they believed I don't have any diarrhea, I don't have panas. So I jumped out from that cattle car. I jumped out. I thought, in my mind I jumped out, I collapsed there. And the two nurses was carrying me like a baby, arm in my arm. Two of them was telling me in Russian, Ladno, Ladno, everything is going to be all right. You going to be healthy, because I said I am strong, I don't have panas. And they started to walk with me to the bed. And they were telling me in Russian, we are taking you to the banya. Again, banya means in Hungarian, mind. Mind, you know mind? Hard labor, where you are working in a mine, coal or stone or any. And she was telling me, she is telling me to the banya. I was translating to myself, the banya means banya, to work, hard labor. Only they meant bed. Banya means bed, because the order you could be taken to the hospital if you have a bed. And they were taking me to a bathhouse, and the Russians have a kind of bed with a bucket, and they pour water, warm water on you, and they are cleaning you. So in this two lady, the two nurse was taking me off the filthy clothes what I had, and they took a razor blade, a razor, sharpening it. My gosh, I was scared to death. What the hell are they going to do to me? I was standing there naked, and they were just telling me, we are taking you to the banya, don't worry. And where, banya, what? You know, this, the mind. And they were shaving my head, my arm, everything. They were shaving me everywhere, and they were taking me to the warm water, and like a baby, they were washing me. The two ladies washed me up like a baby. I never had such a feeling. Today, I feel it. And they gave me a clean rope, a made in USA, a clean rope, and a pair of socks, and two towels, and a slipper. I put it on. I was in heaven. I had a clean rope. I was taking a bath. I put on a socks, and the two ladies was coming with me to the hospital. And the hospital, I was the number one again. And I was going in. There was a lineup of doctors with all the instrument. Everybody is poking my stomach. I was, that time I discovered, because they were waiting with a scale, I was 75 pounds. I said, I am healthy. And they said, oh, Lado, you are healthy. Panos, yes? And I said, no panos. So they opened the door. I never forget. The music was the Aida March from the opera, the Aida March. They opened the door. There was a classroom with 21 beautiful white bed. And they put me, and I selected a bed, and I fell asleep. And when I woke up from the sleep, the room was filled with all these sick people, wonderful treatment, whatever I imagine, that was from the Russians. And the doctor who was standing in front of me and telling me my name, the first time 2 years before I was a number, and he was asking me, how are you, Goldstein? Как дела, Goldstein? I was in heaven. How he knows my name? I didn't know it was on the end of my bed, that the name and my number. I was number 1. I woke and I woke up more than 48 hours I slept. And the doctor was promising us we're going to have food, we're going to have everything. And this is the way it is. They saved our life because they taking care of us like babies. Again, I was a maniac that time, and I saw they were building the guard tower. And I wanted to go out to work. And as I was healthier, they let me out in the springtime to work a little bit, and I was carrying a bucket of sawdust to insulate the guard post. I was thinking I was healthy. I couldn't lift up the bucket. I was so weak. Only I was the first one who get admitted to the camps. I left the beautiful hospital, and that's again the order. The healthy go out to work. So I got again a boots, a clothing. Certainly in the voyant planis, the prisoner of wars didn't get the best one. They were taking, and we get clothes, and we had to walk more than 26 miles to the camp. Now that guy who just rebuilt the strength from the typhus, I was 75 pounds when I was admitted. I wasn't more than 90 when I came out, and I had to walk. And I was taken to the camp. There, because the Hungarians had a good name, they were taking us to a collective farms. And in the collective farms, you are working and you get fed. How you work, though, that way you are getting the food. And we were working, it was in August, and the city where the hospital was in Gorky.
Oh.
You know Gorky? Gorky is where
Sakharov was under house arrest.
House arrest. That was Gorky where the hospital was. And we had to march. And in end of August, they were taking us to Siberia. And in Siberia, we had to work. And from 1943, January the 12th, I was prisoner of war to 1947, August the 11th. We were taken, if you saw the films of One Day of Ivan Danilovich, I don't know you saw it or not, or The Man Who Came from the Cold. Did you see this film?
I've read One Day in the Life.
One Day of Ivan Danilovich. That was my day. One day was like the Ivan Danilovich one day in my prison camp. I have to tell you, I survived there. I have to tell you again why I survived there. Because if you didn't work, you didn't get food. If you were working, you get food, what they didn't steal, the officers didn't steal from the prisoners. Because the prisoner of wars officially got the good food. The army got just what the Russians able to get. Only because of the international agreement, they had to give us the food. They had to get the food. Only they didn't have to give us the food. They took themselves the food and they gave us the Russian food. So since prison camp, I am not eating fish because every day, 3 times a day, you ate salt, rotten fish and cabbage soup. And this is the way we worked, and this is the way we started our living in Siberia, where was 42 centigrade below zero. And we survived there, and we survived in the way because we had to cut woods. You know, to cut woods. We were 250 miles from Arhangelsk. Arhangelsk is the seaport of the Northern Sea. So whatever you saw and heard about the Northern Light, we enjoyed the Northern Light. We were working, and when we were taking to the camp, we were marching to one place, and there was a pole, and it was the number. It's number 103 per 3 camp. This is the camp. Now you had to make the camp. You had to build the camp. You were sleeping on the ground. You sleeping on the snow, and you had to survive. No, if you were sick, they were taking you to the hospital and rejuvenate you and taking back to the camp again. So this game was you were playing all in your life. Now some people didn't wanted to play, didn't wanted to work because the Nazis didn't wanted to work for the communists, the Hungarian didn't want to work the Russians. I wanted to work for the Russians because this is the way I survived. This is the way I became one of the best workers in the camp.
And how long did that last?
It lasted until I came home.
And when was that?
In 1947, August the 11th. Only I became a hudожник.
What is that?
The hudожник is the artist. Because when I was making my norma, after that I had to cut 2 cubic yards, which means to cut out the tree and cut 1.5 yard long pieces, making us, they ordered to make a big place, pile, and there was a system how we were cleaning the woods. Now the wooded area was a burning woods. It was fire in the woods in 1938. Everything was dead there. The whole area was dead. It was bigger than Belgium, the whole area. It was trees which you have to cut it out, and I learned, and I was ambitious, and I became strong enough, and I knew that I have to work myself up. Only when I finished my work, I had a little notebook, and I started to make sketches. And I started to make drawings of the soldiers, the guard. And the primitive soldiers, you know, that was the one thing. They were sitting down, and they said in Russian, "Рисуешь me, make me a drawing." You know, and they had the red
Epaulets?
epaulets, and I got I got from them pencils, and they were bringing me pencils, and they were bringing me crayons, and I worked up myself the художник. Everybody wanted to come in our platoon to be a guard because they get a portrait. And I was working up myself. I was an artist, and the commandant found out I am Jewish, and I could make drawings, and I started to make the posters and
We've had tape back again. We'll just end with another tape. What I want to ask you, Alfred, is...
Okay, I'm
we
finishing
wanna,
it.
Okay, we want to get your whole story in. We've got people out there waiting for now. Would it be okay if you came back and finished up? We could give you the tapes you did. You could even review them.
Okay, fine.
Okay, because
When do
I'm
you
worried
want-
about them. Otherwise,
Okay.
we could probably go on.
Only it's going a half an hour. It's
What?
going to be a half an hour, the conclusion.
Yeah, well,
All right, whatever.
maybe we should... Let me ask Sabine.
Let me
She might
talk
wanna
to Sabine a second, okay?
What will our conferences?
My gosh, I am
Whoop,
saying
I'm
four out,
connected to
3
this.
out.
Wait a minute. 1 second. I forgot I was attached.
Hello,
Oh, hi, I'm Sabine Himmelfarb.
hello, Alfred, Tibor.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We do want to hear the rest of your story. There's somebody who has been waiting for a while, so we're going to see whether he...
Okay,
We're going to ask
okay.
him if he doesn't mind waiting, then...
Okay,
we will
okay,
answer.
all right.
Take a little break.
Okay, I am sorry.
That's okay, that's okay.
Oh, you're going to go this way, I'll go with you.